Aaron David Miller is a former U.S. Middle East negotiator who worked for Republican and Democratic secretaries of state and who knew Shimon Peres personally. He is joining us on the telephone. Aaron, a towering figure, not just in Israeli politics, but in world politics.
No doubt. And given the leadership vacuum throughout the Middle East and in Israel as well, Shimon Peres' passing is going to be marked, I think, by a huge vacuum. He, together with Ariel Sharon, were the last two members of the founding generation. Israeli political leadership has now passed to a younger generation who seem to lack the confidence, the authority, and the authenticity of Peres, Rabin, Menachem Begin, and of course, Israel's greatest prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. I interviewed Peres on the occasion of his 90th birthday, and I asked him what it takes to be a good leader, and he said, if you want to be a leader, you have to serve, because what you can achieve by goodwill, you cannot achieve by power. And if you look at Peres' career, it's remarkable. It's intertwined, literally, with the story of the modern state of Israel, almost from its inception. He was a member of the Knesset for 48 years, longer than any other serving Knesset member. He served 12 cabinets, including finance, defense, foreign minister. And, of course, in 2007, he was elected as Israel's ninth president. Never got to be prime minister, at least by his own personal mandate. He served in a rotation, and then he inherited Rabin's post temporarily after the assassination. But still, his legacy, I think, in peacemaking and as well as in building Israel's defense and security establishment is really quite remarkable.
Yeah, Aaron, talk to us a little bit about that Nobel Peace Prize that he shared with Yasser Arafat, who was the leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization for the Oslo Accords that were signed back in 1993. How important was that?
I think to Peres personally, certainly, it was remarkable. Menachem Begin had been responsible for peace with Egypt, and of course, Yitzhak Rabin would be responsible for peace with Jordan. I think Peres saw his role. Well, Rabin preferred the Syrian track. Peres saw his role as making peace with the Palestinians, and in secret negotiations, he with Rabin's blessing, of course, and input, ended up concluding a remarkable set of arrangements, which later known as the Oslo Peace Process. Structurally flawed, it was still nonetheless a heroic effort to reconcile Palestinian national aspirations with Israeli aspirations as well. I remember talking to Peres shortly after the signing ceremony on the White House lawn, and I remember, how enthusiastic he was and how convinced he was that this would represent a turning point. Sadly, for Peres, his legacy lies now pretty much broken and bloodied. And I think if he had one objective in his career, I think it would have been to leave a legacy of a better relationship with the Palestinians.
Aaron, talk to us, you just mentioned a little bit of that, but talk to us what it was like for Mr. Peres at the beginning, at the founding of the nation of Israel back in 1948. As you pointed out, he worked with David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister. Even before the creation of the state, he was a member of the pre-independence military organization, the Haganah. What did he say to you in those times that you've spoken to him about what the times were like back then?
I never talked to Peres about the early days. I can only attest to a meeting or breakfast I attended at Sharon's farm in 2002 when former Special Envoy Anthony Zinni and I were charged with trying to negotiate a ceasefire between Sharon and Arafat. And I remember watching and listening to Ariel Sharon and Peres talk about the old days. And what was so remarkable, here you have two men of different temperament and certainly of different political persuasions, kind of united in the reality that the two of them had witnessed and seen just about everything. They were not members, essentially. Peres was young at the time, so you wouldn't call him a founder, but he clearly was a member of that founding generation. And remember, those were the days when Israelis were given tremendous responsibilities at a very young age in the early years of independence. I mean, at 24, Peres was already intimately involved in shaping the Israeli Navy. By the age of 29, he was already Director General of the Israeli Defense Ministry and responsible for not only deepening Israel's military capacity, but he would be responsible ultimately for the secret program that led to the development of Israel's nuclear weapons industry. So Peres really was there. I told him my interview with him in foreignpolicy.com, present through the creation, not at the creation. Shimon Peres was there to watch it all, and it's a remarkable testament. One of the few, I think, political leaders in a democratic polity. I would compare him, perhaps not an accomplishment, to Hamilton or Franklin, who never really achieved the highest office of his country, but played a seminal role in just about every other capacity. And the quote Peres gave me when I interviewed him at 90, if you want to be a leader, serve, because what you can achieve by goodwill, you cannot achieve by power. Peres really was denied what I think he wanted most, other than to leave a legacy of peacemaking. He was denied the opportunity to be elected by the people of Israel in his own right as prime minister, and I think that hurt him. I think to a large extent, Peres had imperfections and failings. He was mocked by Israeli politicians and pundits for his narcissism, for his political slipperiness. A lot of that image softened, though, when he became president of the state in 2007. His prudence, his wisdom, his capacity to represent Israel abroad at a time of great uncertainty, I think, in some respects, charmed a nation. And whether he became the grandfather of that nation is highly arguable. But I think he's going to be mourned and missed, because if at any time in the history of his country that country needed his wisdom and prudence, they need it now.
And I wonder, though, as well, Aaron, give us a sense of what it was like after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin back in 1995, and he then took on the mantle of prime minister for a nation that was severely was in mourning.
You could look for comparisons in American politics. You can look at the Rabin assassination, perhaps. I mean, Israel had never had an assassinated leader before Rabin, at least a prime minister. We had lost several American presidents before Jack Kennedy was killed. But, he did in some respects try to play Johnson to, not consciously, but perhaps reflected Johnson's efforts to continue, let us continue, Johnson said, to try to implement the legacy of the martyred president. Johnson did an extraordinary job, and Peres did too. And in a way, he and Rabin were desperate rivals for so many years. And I think certainly on that final night, they had come together in the interests of political harmony and peacemaking. And I think Peres, perhaps to a fault, rather than call for early elections, which he probably would have won in the wake of a martyred prime minister, with the momentum and the sympathies of the country on his side, he deferred his political instincts and waited. And that delay probably cost him, because ultimately, as you know, he would lose the election to the current prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. So the one instance when Peres's more ennobling instincts triumphed over his political ones, I think cost him dearly. And who knows? The future of the state of Israel might have taken a different turn had Peres declared himself a candidate in the early months of 1996 instead of waiting.
Aaron David Miller, thank you so much for your beautiful eulogy and your insights, your valuable insights into this towering figure. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.